Hi, I'm Paul Rushworth-Brown, host of Down Under Interviews, History Bards, and Meet the Author indie book source over in the US. And I'm here with a very interesting author who's written a very interesting book, Vince Rockston. Now, welcome to the show, Vince.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I'm pleased to be here.
So, I mean, we've got to be brutally blunt about this novel. Why tell a story about religious persecution now?
Well, there are two reasons, but one is that I've been involved with caring for refugees here in Switzerland, refugees mainly from the Middle East or Afghanistan, and they've had a very traumatic journey, and mostly people don't really listen to them. They just say, oh, we don't want them, they're a problem, they don't understand us, they don't speak the language, they're taking our jobs. So I realize that's a very topical subject. And the other thing is that my ancestry are Huguenots. I was born on the island of Jersey, and my mother is from the island, and in her parentage, there were Huguenots who had to flee from France because of religious persecution.
15-year-old Gédéon d'Albert watches his world fracture as religious persecution sweeps across France. Hunted by King Louis XIV's dragoons, separated from his father and driven into exile, Gédéon is forced to confront questions far beyond his years: faith, justice, and the true cost of power. As families are torn apart and children seized in the name of the true religion, one boy's journey carries him from provincial France to Geneva, Jersey, and beyond. But hidden within his family's flight is a secret, one that could shake the throne of France itself. Greet Suzon is a historical novel about belief and the siege, moral courage, and what survives when authority turns against humanity.
And so those were the two aspects why I was interested to write a historical book that would be relevant for today.
I mean, really, we'll get into this a little bit later, but what you're writing about, obviously it's historical fiction, but largely based on events that happened back in the 17th century. But I assume that a lot of the things that were happening back then are happening now somewhere in the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a different theme, but it's often there are either religious conflicts or some kind of racial or political conflicts that mean that people have to leave their homes, and in desperation they try to find somewhere else to live. And just as in my book, they have to travel overseas, and it's a very dangerous journey. We hear the stories of these dinghies between Turkey and the Greek islands that get sunk, or between Libya and Italy, and often totally overloaded and very dangerous weather conditions. And yet these people are desperate to start a new life because their life was intolerable where they were before.
Yeah. So without mentioning any names or getting into any type of political conversation, do you see parallels between Louis XIV and what might be happening in today's world?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, he was very autocratic, dictatorial. He wanted to make all the decisions himself, and he was convinced that he knew the right way to do this. One thing was he was attacking all the nations around him, the Spaniards and the Dutch and the different people, so even the Turkish people he attacked, but also from the religious point of view, he was sure that there should be just one church in France, the Catholic Church, and anybody who didn't attend the Catholic Mass was a heretic, and they should be got rid of. They should be forced to either join the church or else flee the country, or they were arrested and often sent to the galleys to work as galley slaves in the Mediterranean, and that was no fun. So I guess, in a way, this sort of dictatorial style is something that is becoming more prominent in certain countries these days as well.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think, after so many years, you think, as a species, we would have got a little bit better, but it seems we don't learn. But anyway, let's move on. So Gédéon is only 12 when violence hits his community. What? I mean, there's some pretty brutal occasions in this novel. Why tell it from the angle of a 12-year-old?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I just thought that I wanted one character who would be the main character who would go through the whole book. He was very shocked as a 12-year-old to see how his temple, his religious meeting, was interrupted by ruffians, and his pastor was arrested, or they tried to arrest him at least. And it made no sense to him, but we're all supposed to be Christians. Why should we be fighting against each other? And so, starting with the eyes of a young boy, and he goes through a whole series of experiences, first together with his father and then alone. And in the end, he becomes the dominant character in the story. I think it just made sense to have one character going through the whole story like that.
Two lives separated by decades. Two stories shaped by war, loss, and the search for something better. In 1943, Bernhard Lang is swept into the tide of World War II, a young man fighting to survive a world collapsing around him, until an unexpected ally shows him a life he never imagined. 22 years later, 12-year-old Joseph Holloman is drowning in a childhood no one should have to endure, alone, until he meets Frank Gardner, a quiet man with a past he rarely speaks of. But Frank carries a secret, one that reaches back to Bernhardt's war-scarred journey and forward into Joseph's desperate hope for escape. Across time, across trauma, across lives shaped by forces beyond their control, their stories collide in a moment that changes everything. Between the clouds and the river is where the past finally finds its voice, and redemption finds its way home.
Yeah. So what part of doing your research and all that type of thing? What part of that period in history sort of like shocked you the most when you were researching it?
Well, shocked. It was, on the one hand, life was very simple and primitive for most people. The peasantry had a very tough time. They were subsistence farmers mainly, and they had to pay heavy taxes to the king because he was wanting to finance his wars against the neighboring countries. But I think certainly the persecution of Huguenots was really terrible, really shocking, that they would use soldiers, they called them dragoons, who would just come into somebody's house and demand to be fed and to stay there. And they could mistreat the people as much as they liked, if they weren't willing to recant their faith and abjure and sign a document that they would join the Catholic Church. So there was real brutal torture and cruelty done by these dragoons to ordinary, simple people, and some were killed in the streets with the wheel, horrible means of torture, or hung on the gallows, or sent as slaves to the galley ships. that brutality, I suppose, was what really shocked me most. Yeah.
That whole idea of sort of like Christians and Catholics and Protestants and all that type of thing. It's going on. It's been going on for sort of like a decade, like centuries.
Yeah.
How is it going to change? How do we change it? That's a tough question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just to put it out there.
Well, I know there are many groups that are so fixed in their perspective that they only see the things that are wrong or the things they disagree with in the other groups. On the other hand, I've been involved with sort of an ecumenical movement here in the town near where I live. And I see that it is possible for Catholics and Reformed and Free Church people to sit together and cooperate and have joint activities, and that encourages me. I think the developments in the Vatican with the new popes who are much more open to talk to Christians from other denominations and to listen to them, to respect them, even if there are theological differences. There isn't that open hostility on the highest levels. It's more so the grassroots people who just can't cope with different practices or different styles of worship or different doctrines. But at the higher levels, I think there are signs of people accepting each other in spite of their different denominations.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example was King Charles meeting the Pope a while back. So we'll see
and
what
praying
happens.
Together with him, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Gédéon's father's arrested during a secret cave service. Is there a personal or historical moment that inspired that scene, and was it difficult to write?
Well, there are historical documents of such events. You know, the Huguenots had to meet up secretly, and so they often went up into the hills or into a cave or somewhere in a clearing in the forest and had a secret meeting, maybe very early in the morning. And sometimes the marshals or the soldiers got word of it and they came, and then they did arrest people, and sometimes they were very cruelly treated when they were arrested. The incident that I write in the book is fictitious, but it's the sort of thing that was happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you find? I mean, I would find sort of like writing about morality and all that type of thing. I mean, you know, I suppose just about in every novel there's some sort of level of values and morality, but when it's sort of like tied up with religion, I would find that difficult to write about. Did you have to come to terms with that?
Well, it's not easy, but I tried to point out that you know, there were good people on both sides, and there were some that were so fanatical that they just couldn't tolerate anybody from the other group. But there were grassroots people who helped. For instance, when Gédéon was looking after that little girl, Sophie, and her mother was dying, her family cared for them, and even the priest helped them to find their way to Geneva. So there were ordinary people who were open to be helpful. It was more so the hierarchical people who were so obsessed with their own ideas that they couldn't tolerate anybody from the other group.
In 1937, life offered little mercy, and for Vesta Blahnik, each day felt like one more step toward losing everything she had ever known. On a struggling Minnesota farm, she worked from dawn until long after dark, holding together a home her father had already decided to leave behind. When he sold the farm without a word, Vesta was left with no money, no security, and nowhere to go. Her only lifeline came in the form of letters, promises of stability from a man she had never met. Desperate, she put her future in the hands of strangers, hoping the truth would be kinder than the world she was running from. But in North Carolina, Gordon Crenshaw faced a darkness of his own. A widower consumed by grief, confined to a state hospital and forgotten by the family who sent those letters in his name. When Vesta arrived, the promises collapsed. Two strangers, both abandoned in different ways, forced together by desperation, circumstance, and the simple need to survive. Now they must find a way to build a life from whatever pieces the world has left for them.
And Gédéon himself was experiencing that and couldn't understand it. He said, well, but we're all supposed to be Christians. Why do we fight against each other? What's it all about? And he had deep spiritual questions himself that, what is true? Does God really exist? Does he care for us? And why is he on one side or the other? Or why do people say he's on one side or on the other? So he was struggling with his own faith, which comes out later in the book when his sister actually passes away after her serious illness. And he has a religious experience himself where he meets with Jesus in the night after he's watching over his sister's dead body. And he has this strange encounter, which then encourages him to believe in Jesus himself. And from then on, his life is different. He's much more confident, but also willing to listen to both sides. He's not obsessed in his views, but he's sure that there is a God who cares for them and guides them. And that's an important aspect towards the end of the book.
Yeah. So Madeleine's death is obviously, a pretty emotionally charged scene. Was that one of the most difficult scenes for you to write?
It was difficult, and people who've read it have said that it brings them to tears because they got to love her, and then why did she have to die? But the scene afterwards, as he's watching over her during the night, where he has that mystical encounter with Jesus, that sort of came to me almost by surprise. I was not planning to write that, but it was as if that story had to be told, that aspect of the whole experience. And I think that was very meaningful, and it's quite an important detail in the story.
So, some amazing characters. Noel,
yeah. His childhood friend who turns against him.
I mean, is he based on anyone real or on the contradictions inside, all of us?
Well, he as a person is fictitious. His father was a real person. He really was that intendant in Alençon, appointed by Madame de Guise. We don't know about his son, but I just invented a son for him, and that son was a childhood friend of Gédéon's. Yeah.
So I think it's important to say for the viewers at home watching, is that there is sort of like some pretty important questions raised about morality and that type of thing, but the story doesn't preach, does it? It's just this historical fiction novel and a good story.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I hope that the whole issue of religious conflict and questions about faith comes through in a fairly natural way, and it's not, as you say, I don't think it's preachy.
Yeah. So Gédéon ultimately learns about himself by the end. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, when they eventually get to the island of Jersey, and he studies as a lawyer and becomes he gains quite a good reputation for his views of justice and his upright behavior. So he gets sent on a secret mission to London to talk to the new king, King William III, commonly known as William of Orange. He had just become king fairly recently, and he was changing a lot of things, especially that he was then strongly opposed to King Louis XIV. So the war was developing there. And Gédéon was sent with a secret message to him, and in fact got to meet the king there in London. The king then had heard about Gédéon's secret, which I probably shouldn't just mention in detail here because that would be too much of a giveaway. And so we find Gédéon having quite a significant role between the governor of Jersey and the king, the new king of England. And we're kind of left a bit with an exciting thought that maybe there's a new development coming in Gédéon's life, that he's got a very important role to play in the future, but we don't really know much about it.
Mm-hmm. So, two questions. Who should read this novel? And what do you want readers to take away from it?
Well, I think it could be for young adults, but it's mainly more so for adults, probably mainly men who are interested on the one hand in history, but also interested in the political situation today, like the whole refugee crisis. I would hope that they would also come to grips with questions about their faith in God and whether it makes sense to have conflicts between different religious groups. Maybe there's a better way to go, that if one really has a sincere faith in God, that we don't need to condemn and fight against others who see things a bit differently. So I would hope that might come through the book as well, that sort of message.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so this is my favorite part of the show, and it's 10 quick fire questions. All right, so short, punchy, personality revealing answers, 1 or 2 word answers, and if you say something interesting, I'll just get you to expand on it. All right, are you ready? Okay,
yeah.
so which character surprised you the most while writing, and why?
I think Gédéon's sister Madeleine, who had a very simple faith in spite of the fact that she was very sick and suffering, and
Okay, moment in history you'd love to witness firsthand, but only for one day.
Well, I think what comes to mind is the resurrection of Jesus after his crucifixion.
Okay, which is harder, forgiveness or justice?
Forgiveness.
Coffee, tea, or wine when you write?
Tea.
Is Gédéon more like you or someone you wish you could be?
He's not really like me. I guess I would like to be more like him, yes.
Okay, good answer. Your favorite place in France, historically or personally?
Well, I went on a tour visiting different Huguenot sites 2 years ago. There's a museum that documents the history of the Huguenot underground movement, the Musée du Désert. That impressed me very much, yeah.
Okay. One scene you're most proud of writing?
I think the fight scene between Noël and Gédéon.
Okay. And if you could sit down with Louis XIV for 5 minutes, what would you ask him? What would you say to him?
Why did you build Versailles?
Yeah. Okay. Three words to describe your book.
Persecution, adventure, faith.
Wonderful. Vince, it's been a wonderful time having you on the show. I know that some of those questions were pretty hardcore, but it's the best way to sort of like get for people to sort of like see who you are and look and see what the book is. So Greet Suzon for me. I wish you all the very best with it.
Yeah, that's the book.
Wonderful. And I hope it becomes a bestseller.
Well, that would be great.